excited to feature a conversation with a Detroit-based interdisciplinary artist celebrated for her impactful assemblages and immersive installations. Her latest exhibition, Ancient Future, is a journey through Afrofuturism, Black mythologies, time, so many different themes that are there. And the themes are presented through dynamic paintings, film explorations, and engaging installations. Please join me in welcoming the incredibly talented Jamia Richmond-Edwards, the real JRE. We have these moments that are touch points, maybe super early, maybe, a little bit later, what have you, that have a significant impact on what we do creatively. So
Yeah.
what is a moment or an experience for you? Because it could be a sum of moments, but what's an experience for you that influenced you on your path as an artist, as that stewardess, as a creative?
So I'm going to actually touch on three.
Please.
The first one was when I was about 16 years old. I was taking a gifted and talented class for car design here in Detroit. And it was at Wayne State University, which is a university based here in the city. And the teacher, kind of stood in front of the class and said, "Hey, it's an exhibition in the local gallery here." And he took us on a little mini field trip, which was right down the hall from the class. And in that exhibition, that's when I first saw Renee Cox's work. And it was the painting called The Liberation of Aunt Jemima and Uncle Ben. That was the first time, I believe, just going back, that I saw work made by a Black person, let alone a Black woman, and really contemporary artwork.
Yeah.
And from that, at that point in my life, I would go to the Detroit Institute of Arts, which is our, fine art institute here. And I went often, but I never seen work that reflected me. So that was I was just really overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, this is art. And I remember the teacher saying, "Yeah, and that's the artist in the photograph." And I was just overwhelmed, like, oh shit, this is fly. You know what I'm saying? And in terms of you have to just think how impactful that was for me. My understanding of quote unquote fine art was Van Gogh and, kind of Renaissance art. And again, I'm growing up in the 90s, listening to Pac, Bad Boys, all those things. Seeing Renee Cox's work is just like, oh, this is what fine art could be.
Yeah.
So that kind of gave me that permission. The second impactful moment was me when I entered into graduate school, which was 2010 at Howard University. And that's when my beautiful dark twisted fantasy dropped with Kanye West. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
I was just what do y'all realize? For me, that was very paradigm shifting. And I also feel like it was very paradigm shifting for the culture. That was equivalent to, a modern times Thriller. I just was like, oh shit, the music, the art direction, just it was so good. So that had a major impact on me. And lastly, was the Beyonce concert. I respect Beyonce, but I'm not a stan. I had a couple of songs on my playlist of Beyonce, but last year I went to the concert Renaissance, and oh my gosh, I didn't go as a fan. I went as a spectator. I'm about to really take this in, and it just was very paradigm shifting for me. And so these moments that I just named, to me, were art by Black folks at the highest fucking caliber. You know what I'm saying? Like high caliber, very avant-garde, very unapologetic, very thought-provoking. And so those three moments really were life-changing for me.
But I want to go a little bit deeper on, sort of thinking of influence and inspiration, whether it be from painting, whether it be from fashion, film, music, diverse people. We have diverse interests. Where do you look for inspiration, and sort of what are the themes that come up that are truly interesting to you, and why?
Well, I have two answers to that. The first one is, so I moved back to Detroit in 2021, after being away for 22 years, So I left high school in 2000 and I returned. So that's 21 years, excuse me. And being away and then coming back, I'm like, oh shit, Detroit is so fly. Like this is a very unique city. And I realized that it's a lot of swag, it's a lot of cool, it's a lot of beauty in where I come from. And so I became really inspired by that. One of the things that's emerged in my work over the past couple of years is dragons and a lot of mythos, what people call a mythos. But I didn't start doing dragons until I moved back to Detroit, and I would walk downtown and I'm just like, well, I've never been interested in dragons and shit ever in my life. And as I began like just immersing myself in the city, I started noticing that the architecture here had dragons in them. It's a lot of fucking dragons and unicorns. So that perked up two things, okay? One is why I've been studying art my whole life. Why we want to talk about this? What is this? Who designed this? Why is this a secret? And more importantly, when I look at myself in relationship to the world and how the sort of energy that I vibrate on, I'm like, this is dragon energy. And from a very lame artistic perspective, when we think in terms of dragons, we think of like the Chinese dragon, like that's how let me stop saying weird. That's how I've been programmed. And as I began noticing that, I'm like, oh shit, this is a whole other like paradigm of the Detroit dragon. So what does that mean? So I've been in that space of like, yo, I'm a Detroit dragon. I'm about to explore this. Yeah. This mythos I can't find in a book, so I need to create it myself. So I've been really inspired by the city. And when you just look at like the swag and culture and energy of the city, it's been kind of reverberating in my artwork. The other thing that I'm very inspired by since really the past 6-7 years has been genealogy. So I started doing genealogy in that was 2016, right before I went to West Africa. And before I went, I was just like, I'm about to hire a genealogist because I'm gonna find my tribe. I just had this spirit just came up and and I remember I was up in Ghana and I received a call from my genealogist. And he was like, and this is guy from PG, I was teaching at the time, a PG, like an old school PG dude. He and his wife just did genealogy for fun. And he called me. He's like, I need you to call me as soon as possible. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm in Africa. He about to tell me I'm adopted or some crazy shit. So long story short, I get home and he tells me like, yo, this is the craziest shit ever. I started doing your genealogy and I'm up in like the 1600s. And what's interesting is your family was never enslaved. 2, they were in the South. 3, what's going on? Like, this is interesting. So right then and there, it was like that changed everything because I was on this hunt to understand. He didn't have answers. Yeah. It was a quote unquote friend that I had at the time who was a history major. She didn't have answers. So I had to go on this journey myself. So, I've been, since 2017 on this journey of just uncovering this genealogy, which essentially is uncovering who I am. And what I discovered was, as I began reading those names and those genealogical records, I began unlocking things within myself. Just even saying my ancestors' name, understanding the lands that they occupied. And it really shifted a lot of things in me because I became a lot more patriotic. Yeah. And I would never thought, like me, I've always been along the kind of, like a lot of Black people, like we tired. We are tired. But as I began understanding my genealogy, how deep it is in this country, all of, Virginia, Mississippi, Arkansas, Detroit, St. Louis. Yeah. And, my family fought in the Civil Wars, the War of 1812 and so forth and so on. I'm just like, there's a lot of I have a lot of equity tied into this particular place.
Yeah.
So my work, as I began understanding that, it's began to reflect in my work. And I see the transition of me, going on this journey of understanding who and more importantly, what I am.
Today, it is my pleasure to welcome my next guest, who strives to create a more just and humane society through her company, the Creative Representation Empire, by illustrating and publishing coloring books and conducting workshops to promote creative representation for Black and Brown children. Please welcome Naomi Winston. Talk a bit about some of those challenges and some of those like early triumphs, like of being a publisher, having your first book, having multiple books at this point. But talk about that a bit.
Yeah, I think that as I've gotten older, I actually started working on my own memoir, which is crazy because I'm like so young. But one of the things that I really want to write about or talking about is, for a long time, I've had this like predisposed thought about what success was supposed to be. And I'd like nowhere where I thought I was going to be when I started college. And for a while, I think I started publishing books because that's what people expected from me. Like my parents always said I was going to be a writer. So I was like, okay, I'm going to be a writer. I'm going to be a writer. And I think that breathing that type of life into a child does a lot of good. But I think it also made me think about everything in my life just as a checkpoint. And one of the things that I've really been saying to a lot of the youth that I've been mentoring or my peers that I talk to is we all have like guiding principles in life. And I think that starting that publishing company was one of my first guiding principles, which is, as a Black person, we shouldn't have to pick if we're going to be Black or a woman or gay this day. I used to say that I'm Black first, a woman second, and gay last. Because like I can change my perception of how I'm perceived in the world based off of how I dress, based off of how I act. Like I can hide, I can mask. And I'm just like, how that's feeding into white supremacy and homophobia to just try to mask who I am as a person. And so for me, I think a lot of those early triumphs were giving Black women the permission to tell their stories in a safe space. One of the books, I actually ended up publishing 3 books for other people. 2 of them were for my classmates. One of them, I started the process of helping my mother publish her book. I helped one of my classmates illustrate a children's book. And one, it taught me a lot about my own self-discipline. You can ask her, she's amazing. The book is selling well. She's a teacher. She uses her own book in her own classes. But it took us so long to finish that book because I was just like, I don't like this style. I don't like this. I don't like this. I'm not where I want to be in order to create this book for you. And we eventually did it, and it's amazing and it's cool. But I think for me, like, it made me come face to face with my own limitations, and my own limitation was myself. It was my lack of ability to allocate time. It was my inability to like stand by my word. And I think that those were really hard things for me to do. And I'm still obviously learning now because I'm so young in my career. I'm so young in my business. And I think that was the hardest part. But I think the best part for me was helping one of my peers in college publish her book. And I read it. And I think that's one of the things I really missed when I had my first publisher, was because she didn't even read my book. She didn't even know what I was talking about in the book. She just like basically threw it into the system and left it where it was. Like she forgot about my book for like 3 or 4 months. I was constantly emailing her, hitting her up, and I'm like, hey, is there any progress or anything like that? And I think it's one of those things where it's like, I got discounted because of my age. Like, oh, you're 16. Like, you really don't care about publishing this book. I'm like, no, I do care. And being able to tell her like, yeah, I read your book. Like, I think your story is so powerful. Thank you for sharing it. Like, that's so beautiful if you've been able to do that. And being able to like hand her first copy of her book was a feeling that I think about a lot. And I hope that that's what my work continues to be in the future, is the opportunity to give people to tell their stories without having to sacrifice themselves to do so.
Talk about how the environmental component has had an impact on how you approach, the creative side, but also the entrepreneurial side.
Yeah, I always like to say it was never a question of if I was going to start a business. It was purely just when and what it was going to be. My dad does real estate. My mom was a business teacher out of high school. My sibling has several companies. My grandfather, who raised 10 children in the middle of the civil rights movement, in Louisiana, had his own company that enabled him to be I think maybe a millionaire by the time he died, or by the time like his estate was passed down to my dad and his siblings. And I was like, that is so beautiful. And I think for me, I'm very original in what you would say, what it was like to grow up in a predominantly white town in the South. It was just so community oriented. It was like, it didn't matter what they looked like up and down the street. My first book was actually dedicated to one of my English teachers in high school, who was a white woman. And she like just poured so much into me. And I think like that was just a very beautiful experience. But I think one of the stories that I always like to tell is how transformational my HBCU was for me. Because I don't know if you've heard, but Xavier is one of the hardest universities in the country to graduate from. And I got my degree a year early, and Xavier made me fight for it. But there's a story I like to call as my A story. So have you ever read The Scarlet Letter?
Yes.
In high school, we read The Scarlet Letter, and all of our English departments were so cool, and we got to do a bunch of different projects. And one of the projects was you had to pick what you thought your biggest personality flaw was and wear the symbol of it around school. And all of your teachers and friends would have to guess what your letter meant. And I put A for anger issues, because who isn't angry at 16? I mean, like everyone's angry at 16. And no, every single one of my teachers and my friends put aggressive. And it was just mind boggling to me, because I was just like, I was literally such a sweet, easygoing person. And I was just genuinely confused. And I got angry about the fact everyone was calling me aggressive, because I just didn't understand it. And then when you're a history major at Xavier, your last paper that you write to exit as your exit exam is, how did Xavier transform you as a person? And I'll never forget that my last line in my paper was, I realized that I was never aggressive. I was a Black girl in a space that wasn't prepared to give me grace. And I think that there are so many moments in my life where I think about those late nights at Xavier. I think about crying every day in my freshman year because it was so hard. And it's just like, Xavier gave me the thing that no other space has been able to, which is the permission to fail, the permission to be angry, and the permission to be tired, exhausted, and the permission to like try stuff and fail. And like, that's not an experience that you can get just anywhere. And I think that environmentally wise, like, I don't know what my life would have been like if I would have went to my local PWI, or if I wouldn't have done my major in history. But I know that who I am right now, and the personality, all the great things I've been able to do in the world is directly reflective of everything that Xavier poured into me.
So today, I am thrilled to introduce my next guest, a Nigeria-born, Baltimore-based visionary behind Yele, which blends Afrofuturism and modern fashion to celebrate African heritage. My guest has been recognized by Essence and Yahoo News and featured in Visa's She's Next 23. Yele is refining luxury fashion. Please welcome Abisola Oladinde. I touched on it a bit earlier. Everyone has their go-to style. Mine is that utilitarian, I'm being productive. And, you know, we have a fit, whether it's, or a sense of style, whether it's running an errand or a night out. How would you describe your personal style, and perhaps how that personal style like blends into like and spills into your designs?
My personal style is just bougie. I can't help it. It's just bougie. Like, I dress up sometimes and be like, "Are you going to work?" I say, "Yeah, I'm going to work." That's my personal style. I love feeling good. I love looking good. And so I love making other people feel and look good. So I'll say it's Afro luxury. It's giving business casual, is giving formal, is giving red carpet. So, so like it just sips in. It's like it's heavy, it's heavy. It has weight. Like that's the vibe. It's giving one of a kind. It's giving, I walk into a room, everybody look at me. That's how it is. Like that is how I always, like, even when I dress down, it's still looking dressed up. I don't even try so hard. I'm like, I'm not really trying.
Like, I'm not this. Man, I
Like,
was just laying over there.
Yeah, I dressed up one time, and then someone was like, "Oh, wow, you look so good. Is this new?" I'm like, "No, this whole thing is 2021. I'm in 2021, but it's good. I'll take it." So, so like that is it. It's like Afro luxury. It's bougie. I love bougie Afro luxury. It's like make me feel good. Let me look good. Let everybody know that I look good. Let everybody know that I stepped into this place without me talking. Let me start conversations with what I wear. Like I don't really say much. I just get in and everybody's like, "Oh, I love that," and then the whole conversation starts. Like that. That is it. That's jelly. Period.
When did you have that moment that fashion was going to be, this is going to be what I'm doing?
When did I have that moment? My Spider-Man moment. This is a very good question. For me, I feel like it's just little things that added up to make it be like my moment. But I remember, I think I remember a defining moment. And it was when I got to the United States. So I was doing fashion back in Nigeria, but like the end point was to still like just do it for the meantime until I finish my master's, because I have a master's in bioinformatics now. Just putting that out there. So I was like, I finished my master's and I become like a full-time professor, a tenure professor somewhere. That was the plan. That was like my plan. So I was just like, I'm just doing this for the meantime to keep myself busy because I don't want to be idle and all of that. But then I got to the United States, and then one day out of the blue, someone just sent me a message. She was like, my fashion designer canceled on me. Can you fill in for me real quick? I have a photo shoot. I'm coming all the way from Philly. I'm coming to Baltimore. Can you like, and I was like, okay, like I do have some pieces that I could throw on the model, and that I did that. And then the next day, it was a 2-day shoot. The next day, there was another shoot, and they were asking me if I had more pieces. I stayed up all night to make new pieces for the shoot for the next day. And then when I got, the shoot was at Graffiti Alley, like at the back of the building that I'm in right now. And then I got to the Graffiti Alley, and then I dressed these models, and everybody kept stopping them like, who made these dresses for you? Who made these dresses for you? And then to make like the icing on the cake, there's this photographer. He's legendary. He's a legendary photographer to me. Jazzy Studios. Jeffrey Butler. He's also in the model house, and his studio was facing the alley. So he saw my pieces and he rushed down to ask the models who was the designer that made the pieces, and they were like, "That's her." And I was like, "Why are they pointing to me?" And then he came up to me and I was like, oh my goodness, I love your pieces. I think it will be great for like a photo shoot in my studio and all of that. And I think that was the defining moment for me. I was like, I love this thing so much that I stayed up all night to make new pieces for this shoot. And everybody was in love with it. I think that was the moment where I was like, okay, yes, I'm doing fashion. For real, for real. Not for fake. I'm doing for real.
Chicago-based artist and author who's joining us today to, have a little story with us. Her work is deeply rooted in big feelings, feminism, and pop culture, and she's made waves. Not only has she illustrated for big names like Netflix, Comedy Central, and ESPN, but her unique art has graced the pages of Glamour and Bridget magazines. Celebrated for her Sidney Taylor award-winning graphic memoir, Dancing at the Pity Party, and her beloved children's book, Bodies Are Cool, she's a true innovator in her field. Most recently, she co-authored Are You Mad at Me with her sister, which is a book about childhood anxiety. Again, those big feelings. It is my pleasure to introduce the incredibly talented Tyler Fetter. So I want to switch into themes a bit. As I have in sort of the intro, I see like feminism field, and we talked about that a little bit, and we've dabbled onto that, and obviously pop culture is in here as well. What draws you like to these themes, and like why are they important in sort of your creative work and your art and your writing? Why are they important to you?
Well, when I started putting art on Tumblr, I think I was really trying to find a subject that a lot of people would want to read blogs. So I did primarily like fan art and stuff at the beginning. And then once I got more followers, I felt like I had a little bit more flexibility to try to like bring in some other topics, and making like personal sort of confessional ish style art was something that just like felt really good to do. Um, and I am in a family with 3 girls, no boys. So um, I have naturally a feminist bent. And then my sisters and I have all struggled with varying kinds of eating disorders over the years. And so that was kind of my like entry point into body positivity, like that side of feminism.
Sure.
And making art like that just like felt really good. And it got this response that I really liked where people would say, like, this is the first time I've seen someone who looks like me um, drawn where it's not in a negative way. And that kind of spiraled into working on all kinds of diversity. And I mean, I think of like caring about diversity as like a pretty feministy, liberal kind of thing.
It's liberals.
Yeah, it's, I think gradually I realized that this is like, at least for now, the kind of space that feels best for me to inhabit online and with my work.